investment, expanding government expenditure, expanding consumption, whilst creating a trade surplus. You're exporting more than you're importing, and that creates jobs. So this summit is simple. It just focuses on how do you remove, what are the reform imperatives for removing the constraints? Constraints to investments, constraints to government expenditure, constraints to export growth, constraints to consumption and productivity. And we're hoping that as the session goes on, we'll share details of the summit. But my job is to, I think, welcome the members of the press who have been a vital part of shaping the summit agenda and then carrying the summit message beyond the summit. You're welcome. And then to our online guests, you're welcome to this press conference. And we wish everyone a great deliberation and good morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tayo. We'll move on to the address by the chairman of the NESG, Mr. Niyi Yusuf. And we recognize also the attendees online who have joined the press briefing. Thank you. Is it right there?
Okay, let's go on. Morning, everyone, and let me join the CEO in welcoming each and every person to today's press conference. I especially would like to welcome Dr. Felix Okonkwo, the Director of DMAC, Director of Macroeconomics of the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, other members of the public sector here present, members of the private sector, directors of the NESG, and distinguished members of the Joint Planning Committee for the National Economic Summit NEST 31. Our friends and esteemed members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to address you all at today's World Press Conference, where we set in motion preparations for the 31st Nigerian Economic Summit, or we call NEST 31, which is scheduled to take place from the 6th to the 8th of October 2025 in Abuja. That's Monday to Wednesday. This year's summit is appropriately themed the Reform Imperative, Building a Prosperous and Inclusive Nigeria by 2030. This theme is not just a headline, it's well thought through, and it's a statement of the urgency, a reflection of where we are as a nation, and also a call to action on what must be done if Nigeria will truly prosper and for Nigeria to work for all. Over the last 3 decades, the Nigerian Economic Summit and the Nigerian Economic Summit Group have both journeyed through 5 defining phases, each reflecting the state of our economy, the maturity of our policymaking culture, and the resilience of our institutions. From the pre-NESG years of economic collapse and state capture during the military period, to the infancy of a closed economy, and of course, to the early opening up of reforms in the 2000s, to the traction of Vision 2020, and to the volatility of the recent years that have been marked by 2 recessions and a pandemic. The Nigerian Economic Summit has remained a constant platform for setting national priorities, pushing evidence-based reforms, and for building consensus between government, the private sector, and other partners. At every turning point, whether through shaping landmark reforms, for example, in the pension sector, telecoms, agriculture, or the energy sector, or by providing the blueprint out of recession in 2016, the NESG has stood firm as Nigeria's leading dialogue platform for charting a sustainable path forward. As we move into the Agenda 2050 era, the lessons of these past 30 years are not just history, they represent a call to action. The Nigerian Economic Summit has shown that even in the face of volatility, evidence-based dialogue and courageous reforms can redirect the course of a nation. Today, our charge is to sustain the momentum, to deepen the culture of collaboration, and to commit to the structural reforms that will define Nigeria's next 3 decades. Therefore, our tasks at Next 31 in October are very clear. It is really about translating resilience into renewal and reforms into real inclusive prosperity for every Nigerian. Today, we stand at a crucial turning point. Over the past 2 years, Nigeria has embarked on bold and courageous reforms, notably the removal of the fuel subsidies and the harmonization of foreign exchange. These were not easy decisions at all. They demanded courage from governments, resilience from citizens, and sacrifice from businesses. But as global institutions such as the World Bank have already confirmed, these reforms have begun to yield results, narrowing fiscal deficits, injecting a measure of stability into our economy, and creating the conditions for future growth. Yet, if we pause and look deeper, one truth becomes clear. Stability is not the destination. It is only the starting point. The reforms of 2023 and 2024 gave us breathing space, but they will not, on their own, deliver the Nigeria we envision by 2030. What is required now is a second wave of reforms, structural, deliberate, and transformative. Reforms that will move us from crisis management to long-term nation building. The new tax acts that will come into effect in 2020 are a good start. And this is why the reform imperative is not just a choice, but a necessity for Next 31. The Nigerian Economic Summit Group has, through years of research, dialogue, and policy engagement, consistently highlighted the bottlenecks that constrains our growth. Our report on the business environment tells us that without industrialization, competitive and modern infrastructure, inclusive growth, strong institutions, and bold investment strategies, Nigeria will continue to circle the same mountain of low productivity and high vulnerability. It is for these reasons and many more, therefore, that Next 31 is structured around 5 sub-themes. First, driving industrialization-led growth. Because no nation has created prosperity by consuming what other nations produce. We must shift from being import-dependent to becoming an economy that manufactures, that adds value, and that exports competitively. The second theme, or the second sub-theme, is building infrastructure for competitiveness. Because without power, efficient transport systems, broadband connectivity, resilient security, and resilient logistics and assured security, our industries cannot thrive. Infrastructure, as we all know, is a backbone of productivity. The third sub-theme is advancing inclusion for shared growth. Because reforms without inclusion deepen inequality. True prosperity means women, youth, small businesses, and underserved communities must all benefit from the growth story. The fourth sub-theme is strengthening institutions for sustainable impact. Because without the rule of law, without good governance, and without policy continuity, even the best reforms collapse under the weight of weak institutions. And the fifth and last sub-theme is about unlocking investments amid global trade shifts. Because in this era of the African Continental Free Trade Area and shifting global supply chains, Nigeria must not be left behind. We must position ourselves as a destination of choice for capital, for innovation, and for enterprise. Together, these 5 sub-themes and 5 priorities will be anchored on 3 strategic pillars: reforms, resilience, and results. So it's about reforms, our resilience as a people, nation, and businesses, and also about results. Ladies and gentlemen, Next 31 is not just another conference. It is a platform to ask the difficult questions, to hold ourselves accountable, and to chart the practical pathways that can turn reforms into meaningful results. We gather government leaders, private sector champions, development partners, and civil society voices. Together, we will shape the policies and partnerships that can transform this moment of fragile stability into a decade of sustainable prosperity. The choice before us is stark. We can either treat the reforms of today as an end in themselves and risk sliding back into fragility, or we can seize them as the foundation for a new Nigeria that is prosperous, resilient, productive, inclusive, and globally competitive. As we prepare for Next 31, I urge all Nigerians to engage actively. This is not a summit for policymakers alone. It is a summit for business owners who are seeking opportunity for growth. It's also a summit for young people demanding jobs. It's a summit for communities longing for inclusion. And above all, it's a summit for every citizen who believes in the promise of Nigeria. The reform imperative is not about tomorrow. It is about the choices we make today. Together, let us build a prosperous and inclusive Nigeria by 2030. I thank you for listening, and may God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Okay, so following the chairman's speech and recognizing that the reforms imperatives are not just for today, but for tomorrow, we will watch the TVC right now and then take questions afterwards.
One step at a time. We may live different lives in different places, but we share the same home. That progress using it's found. Reforms and local policies. They shape how we learn, how we earn, and how we live. NES 31, the reform imperative, building a prosperous and inclusive Nigeria by 2030. This October, let us come together to shape the future, because the tomorrow world starts with the actions we take today. Join us from October 6th to 8th, 2025 to register. Visit nesgroup.org/31. Every day, Nigeria.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Riding on the chairman's speech, we have the Director for Microeconomics from the Budget and Planning Ministry, Dr. Felix Okonkwo, who would deliver the minister's address. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Mr. Niyi Yusuf, the CEO of the NESG, distinguished members of the JPC, my colleagues, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, this address is from the Honorable Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Senator Atiku Abubakar Bagudu, CON. He is supposed to be here today, but other national engagements took him outside the country. So he asked me to be here to represent him. So I'm going to read his address. It is with great pleasure that I address you today at this press conference, which is one of the critical components of the hosting of the 31st Nigerian Economic Summit, NESG 31, scheduled to take place from 6th to 8th of October 2025. As we are aware, the summit is organized by the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, working closely with the Nigerian Federal Minister of Budget and Economic Planning. The theme for this year's summit is the reform imperatives, building a prosperous and inclusive Nigeria by 2030. The theme is apt: strive to build an inclusive and resilient society. Gentlemen of the press, Nigeria is at a pivotal point, having embarked on a bold and courageous reforms that are beginning to reshape our economy, restoring stability, and laying the groundwork for a sustainable development. The past 2 years have been challenging in reshaping the economic and social trajectory of our country. Decisions such as the removal of fuel subsidy and the unification of the exchange rate are key policy directions of the current administration. These twin policies, however, came with short-term pains and hardships, testing the resilience of households and businesses. But there are essential steps, and the early outcomes show that we are turning the corner. The government policy responses and economic interventions in fiscal policy are strategically aimed at strengthening revenue mobilization, implementing bottom-up cash management, removing subsidies, and ensuring fiscal deficits are no longer financed through ways and means. We are also prioritizing monetary and fiscal policy coordination to stabilize inflation and exchange rates. Our revenue diversification strategy includes boosting non-oil revenue, supporting the manufacturing sector, and driving digital transformation. Our fiscal position is improving. Our debt sustainability looks good, and we have begun to restore confidence in our business environment, as well as economic management. Inflationary pressures were still, while still significant, are moderating as monetary and fiscal policies align. We are sustaining our public infrastructure investment initiatives in transport, power, and digital economy to enhance competitiveness and productivity. Furthermore, we are implementing targeted programs to support vulnerable populations, improve education and healthcare, and develop essential skills. Efforts are also underway to enhance agricultural growth and productivity. There is a strategic focus on increasing the value added of agricultural products rather than relying on export of raw materials. Addressing insecurities in agricultural regions remain a priority to ensure sustainable productivity and resilience. This transition is being supported through mechanization, improved seed varieties, and biotechnology. There is also efforts to improve access to finance and investment, while critical infrastructure such as roads, railways, storage facilities, and irrigation systems are being developed. The credibility of our markets is gradually strengthening and investor interest is returning. There are signals that Nigeria has chosen the right path. We must stay the course to realize the full benefits of these reforms. If we retreat now, we risk undoing the gains of the sacrifices and sliding back to fragility. But if we persevere, we will transform the country and realize the dreams of our founding fathers, which is an egalitarian society and a prosperous. The Renewed Hope World Development Program, recently unveiled by Mr. President, marks a significant paradigm shift in Nigeria's strategy for economic development and poverty alleviation. This ambitious and people-centered initiative is designed to uplift more than 10 million economically active citizens, ensuring that other Nigerians, particularly those at the grassroots, directly feel the positive impact of the administration's ongoing economic reforms. By targeting all 8,809 wards across the 774 local government areas of the Federation, the program guarantees inclusivity, leaving no community behind in the quest for shared prosperity and sustainable growth. This is why State 1 is critical. The 5 sub-themes of the summit align squarely with government's reform agenda and long-term economic priorities, including driving industrialization-led growth, building infrastructure for competitiveness, advancing inclusion for shared growth, strengthening institutions for sustainable impact, and unlocking investment and global trade shifts. At the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, we believe these priorities mirror our national vision of achieving sustainable development, reducing poverty, and ensuring inclusivity for all Nigerians. The next 31st is anchored on reforms, resilience, and results, which complement government's medium-term economic objectives, especially as we consolidate gains and push towards sustainable growth and development. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the press, as we conclude this briefing, I want to reaffirm this administration's unwavering commitment to fostering sustainable growth, ensuring macroeconomic stability, and improving the welfare of all Nigerians. The economic reforms and policy initiatives we have implemented are designed to address security, structural weaknesses, enhance productivity, and position Nigeria for long-term prosperity. While we recognize the economic challenges facing the country, we are confident that our policies will yield the desired results. The stabilization of the exchange rate, declining inflationary pressures, and improvements in fiscal management are already setting the stage for a more resilient and diversified economy. Our focus remains on driving job creation, reducing poverty, increasing non-oil revenue, and improving our external financial position. We call on all stakeholders, including the private sector, to remain partners and Nigerian people to support these efforts. The journey towards economic transformation requires collective commitment, innovation, and perseverance. Together, we can build an economy that is inclusive, competitive, and capable of delivering shared prosperity for all. As we implement the remaining period of the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 and transition into the second 5-year plan 2026 to 2030, we remain committed to policies that will unlock Nigeria's full economic potentials. The government will continue to adopt evidence-based decision-making, foster collaboration and across sectors, and implement reforms that promote long-term stability and economic resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, the message is clear. Tough decisions have been made. The foundation is being laid, and we expect that that will impact positively on the living standards of the people. Government, however, cannot achieve this alone. The private sector, the development partners, civil society, and the press, and indeed every Nigerian must play their parts. As we prepare for the next 31, let us recognize that choices we make today will define the Nigeria of our dream. The journey is not without challenges. By staying the course, strengthening collaboration, and remaining committed to inclusive reform, we can build a resilient and productive society. I thank you and look forward to an engaging summit, the Summit 2031. Thank you very much. 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Felix Okonkwo. And riding on the charge from the Honorable Minister on the need to support the reforms and the need to support driving for imperative reforms for a sustainable and inclusive Nigeria, we will take on questions from the media partners, but not before, right after we take the second TV commercial, so that we all have a view of that. Thank you.
This issue, one drop in the water can affect lives in many ways. A change in spending priorities brings support closer to the people so fields can flourish and food reach more homes. Stronger policies build investor confidence, which unlocks capital, grows business, and creates jobs. From roads to classrooms, homes to markets, reforms touches lives in big and small ways. Next 31, the reform imperative, building a prosperous and inclusive Nigeria by 2030. Join us from October 6 to 8. Register at nesgroup.org/31.
Okay, so we go to the round for the questions. We have a roving mic. questions are now to be fielded from the media. Anyone has questions? Yes, please. Please introduce yourself, your media organization, and then we'll take your questions.
Okay. My name is David Meshoye from The Guardian. Good morning, everybody. Or in the afternoon already. My question is directed to Mr. Yusuf. You've talked much more on reforms introduced by President Tinubu. I want to ask you, your own view, how has this reform impacted easy flow of investors into the Nigerian economy in the past 1 year? Number two, talk about next 31st. What are you doing to ensure that this present government embrace some of your reforms? Those are my questions.
Thank you. Chairman, would you take it now? Okay, so yes, the manager.
Okay, thank you. My name is Babajide Komalafe from Vanguard newspaper. 2030 is just 5 away from now. What informed the choice of 2030? Minding the fact that in previous times, we have had vision, 2010 vision, this and that, and mostly, you know, the target or the objectives were not achieved. So this lofty objective, you know, that's been outlined in next 2031. How confident are you that can be achieved just 5 years from now? Then number two, last year, next 30. What can you tell us what you consider major wins from that nest? In other words, what were the policy recommendations that have been implemented by government and that you can say we're already seeing some impact? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Abdulatif Aliyu from Daily Trust newspapers. Incidentally, the last speaker asked my first question, and the second one to the chairman. You talk about the fact that we need a second phase of reform, which will move us from crisis management to nation building. And what should be the main focus of this second phase of reform? Because the truth of the matter is that while the economy has relatively stabilized, looking at the macroeconomic environment, but the truth is hunger and starvation still persist. And even the DG of World Trade Organization recently made reference to the imperative of providing safety nets for the poorest of the poor. So what should be the thrust of this second phase of reform? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Fakuye Jolaleko, Assistant Business Editor of The Cable. My question is, my first question goes to the Ministry of Budget. There have been discussions about yesterday, the RMAFC spoke about increasing salaries of, you know, the presidents, the political holders and all. And we are and this period is when they're talking about resistance and resilience, and Nigerians should be patient in terms of the policies, and we should sacrifice as well. So this talk of increasing the president or political office holder salary, is it not coming at the wrong time when the government is trying to boost its revenue in order to have enough to, you know, of course, fund safety nets as well? So that's my question to you, and also to the chairman as well. I'd like the chairman to also speak on what he thinks about, you know, the discussion going around about the increase. The next question is about, the next question is about the border. Since I think August 2019 or so, in August 2019, we've had the border closure, and there have been discussion that, of course, we know the impact on small businesses, especially because of the route and all that they use. So is this not time for the government to, don't you think it's time for the government to open the borders? Because here we've had conversations about some borders have been opened, but not all. Looking at in terms of them trying to like bring down the inflation rates, don't you think opening the border now is the right time in order to like support their policies to bring down inflation rates or food prices as well?
Thank you. I think we should, Collins, let's take Collins's question.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Collins, I report for the Nation. Yeah, the key focus of the reforms, especially the one that borders on exchange rate, was the worst hit for most Nigerians. We moved from around 700 to nearly, it has stabilized around 1,516. Now, I mean, for us to measure the impact of these reforms, we are actually thinking that at least if we couldn't get to where we were pre-reforms, we should be at least moving closer to $1,000 to dollar. Now, just an ease for Yusuf, if you could tell us your advice on how government should at least stabilize the exchange rate, make it stronger. At least if we can't get to where we were before the reforms, let's have it halfway. Thank you.
Thank you. So could we, just a moment, please. Chair, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me, and thank you all for the questions. And thank you for throwing the most difficult one at Dr. Konko. So yeah, I'd like you to please start, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me start from the impact of the reforms on investment. That's the first question that was asked. If we look at the way the economy is moving, you can see that we are having a lot of inflows of investment. The last report from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics shows that there's a lot of increase on investment, especially portfolio investment into the country. If the economy, the environment is not good, you will not see investors coming in. So we are having quite a number of inflows into the economy, especially FPI. Then the other one is what informed the choice of 2030. From the Federal Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, we have a national plan. We have Agenda 2050. And that document is being implemented using 5-year medium-term plans. The first medium-term plan is ending in December this year. The second one will start 2026 and end 2030. So the focus is on implementing the second medium-term plan, using these reforms to ensure that we achieve the objective of government by 2030. Of course, you know that this government, the next election after 2027 is 2031. So by 2030, we are looking to a situation where most of the things we are proposing must have been achieved. So that is the reason for the choice of 2030. So we want to have, after the 2030, there's 2031 to 2035, and then 2036 to 2040, until we finish implementing the perspective plan, Agenda 2050. So that is how planning go. How confident are we of achieving the objectives the reforms? They say the weekend that will be good starts on Friday and Thursday. So what we have done so far shows that we are moving in the right direction, as we said. The government is progressing. It was painful initially, but the macroeconomy is stabilizing. And as Okonjo well has said, you have to stabilize the macro environment first before you talk about sustainable growth. So when the growth comes and is inclusive, that's what we are targeting. Everybody will enjoy the stability in the economy. Salaries. The issue of salaries is not a decision one person takes. It's a proposal. that has come to government, which government will discuss and address, looking at the revenue profile of government. You don't just take a decision of salaries without having a consensus. The labor, government, and other partners will be involved in taking a decision on the salary of the public sector office holders. You know, the issue of exchange rate, the stability of the exchange rate. If you look at the exchange rate, if you look at what even the private sector people are saying, is accessible. People now go to the central bank. They don't bribe themselves to get the forex. People get the forex at that rate between 1,500 and 1,600. It's not the time you go to lobby at CBN, get it at cheaper rate. Others will be suffering. People, that's why you have instability. You have maybe at the black market, you have it at 2,000, while at the official window, you have maybe 400, 500. So it is now stable, fairly stable, between 1,500 and 1,600, and you can easily access it. So most of the people in the private sector are happy with it. So that is it's market driven. So it's a bit stable. We're not going to look at a situation where we are targeting something like 700 or 800. And at a point, you will see that you cannot have it if you are doing that. It's better we now get it at market-driven rates, and that's what the government is targeting. I think I have spoken to some of them. The chairman, sir.
Thank you, Director, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Chair.
Thank you, Dimak.
So let me go to the question on how the summit recommendations have impacted on reforms. So I think the first one to, at least the first set of things to note is that Summit 29, which was the first summit that the current government experienced, we use that summit actually to provide an opportunity for the government to provide the country a clarity on what the economic agenda was. And if you remember that summit, we asked the central bank governor, for example, to provide clear forward guidance on where monetary policy was going to travel between 2023 to date. That summit generated about 3 critical recommendations. One was to provide a set of clear fiscal monetary policy consolidation reforms that have been clearly supported and sustained by the central bank. Now, the result of that was really a strong monetary policy stance in 23, and we saw that the reserves saw accrual. One of the things my brother mentioned, I think it was Collins that mentioned FX, one of the wins actually that the government has celebrated because of these clear advocacy trajectory and then reform implementation, is that the reserves saw beefing up because we used to forfeit 60 to 75% FX premium under the multiple FX windows. That's what kept your foreign reserve very low. Now that has accrued, and now at least the historic highs in reserve premium have accrued. So we think that our recommendations from the summit on monetary policy have provided some robustness. Last year's summit, we noted that the reforms, because they were quite noisy, required a more coherent form of well-bundled monetary policy reforms. And you'll see that the central bank kind of slowed down its rapid fire and then consolidated how it was providing guidance to the financial markets. And I think that increased the stability and the confidence. Both Fitch, Moody's, World Bank, IMF, in fact, practically everywhere in the world, those reforms have been celebrated as being key drivers of immense stability to the system. You will also remember that in NES 29, the central bank governor committed to providing visible periodic updates on FX forward contracts. And so we kept tracking and following up that. As you remember, throughout 2024, we called the media into the room as the governor was keeping his commitment. We were saying to the media, the commitments were kept right up till the last point where I think the central bank circular has now noted that that project and the cleanup has been completed, even though there's still concerns from those left out. At least the transparency, the clarity, and the communications has been sustained. On the fiscal reform side, I think the first biggest push of the government was one to expand the fiscal space. And we have seen fiscal space expansion. The state governments are seeing the historically highest fiscal allocation in a decade plus as a reflection of the fiscal space. So in terms of FAC allocation, I think we've that the consistent movement shows a demonstration that one, the current reforms create a fiscal space and the money is getting to the states. Now, how that money is now passing through the system becomes another phase of our reform advocacy and activity, the transparency, the effectiveness, the efficiency of the fiscal disbursements and investments. The second part of fiscal reforms that we've communicated, and this is actually not a NESG 29, in Economic Summit 2019, just before COVID, the NESG showcased something we call the National Taxpayer Perception Survey. That survey triggered a set of risks that the fiscal and tax system was facing. And that data from that tax perception survey then became the foundation for advocacy to radically transform the tax system in Nigeria. When President Tinubu came on board, he then commissioned the Presidential Committee on Fiscal and Tax Reforms, chaired by Chair Taiwo Yedele, who, by the way, was NESG's national leader for the tax perception survey. So what we did was that now that reform had met advocacy, we put all that data that we generated from citizens across the country on the table as the foundation for the committee's work. The result of that was really solid evidence-based, analytic-driven, both reform dynamics, packaging of what now has become the 4 economic stabilization legislation. So we think that that is a big win, not just the law, but that the process was heavily driven by the analytics, the evidence, and the data. Of course, a law does not implement itself. So that reform has now bet reform. Somebody was asking, what is the next wave of reform? That reform has now bet reform wave 2, which is now, can we now implement the stabilization laws? So you can call that, somebody will say, what is wave 2? You can call that wave 2. Trade. NESG has continued to advocate for a posture on trade when Nigeria is not import dependent. I think in Summit 29 and Summit 30, this was a big priority. If you read the president's executive order on the Nigerian first policy, it clearly shows that the priority of government is now to shift decisively our capacity for export-led growth, okay, with some clear directives on the things that we are competitive in, we should move forward. So we think that there is a big win on trade based on just the recommendations from the summit. On investment climate, we think the investment climate has improved, especially because of the combination. I think it was DMAC in his speech that said better coordination between fiscal and monetary policy is giving better signals generally. And one of the first tests for us was when President Trump did his Liberation Day. Those announcements historically are a signal for massive shocks in Nigeria. When you look at the amount of impact of those shocks on the capital markets, it was very moderated. It was the first test on whether a global shock will throw us off. It didn't throw us off significantly. The gap in the market, the CBN was able to respond and meet, and it shows resilience. Maybe not all the resilience we want to see, but better resilience because before, when there's a global shock, Nigeria just catches cold immediately, and we feel it. So I think on trade and investment, our recommendations have been taken. If you read the president's speech to the Federal Executive Council just last week, you will see that he's re-emphasizing a radical, aggressive push for investments and trade expansion. And so we think that the recommendations, one, are translating into reform postures in government. And our work then has shifted to where we find those reformers like, Chair Taiwo Edele. We then are pushing those reformers, working with them to get the hard work done. So if you ask me, the thing that I would say that we have recommended that has not yet gone as well is the social protections. Recommendations of the Summit 29 and the Summit 30 is Nigeria needs to expand its capacity for social protection to reduce the number of us that fall into poverty and go straight to the bottom. That's something we continue to work on because, of course, the number of multidimensionally poor Nigerians is very large. It's over 133 million plus now. Monetary poverty is over half of our population. That's a very large number. And so that's the one recommendation. Maybe if you're scratching your head and say, and I think that what also is pointing to, you say there are all these wins, but the gap in the macro translating to the gap, household, food basket, etc. The way that the ESG trajectory of high growth is we've broken the reforms into 3 waves. Wave 1 is stabilization. Wave 2 is what we call consolidation. And wave 3 is acceleration. The work we did in stabilization, you cannot do it in acceleration. You have to finish that work first. But now that work has been done, the consolidation must allow the macro wins to be used to attract investments, expand trade, to now use that to create opportunities and expand the productive sector, which creates jobs, lifts the income of households, expands consumption, and brings down the inflation rate. My brother was talking about the board and inflation rate. So I think that's where we are. We are shifting from stabilization to consolidation reforms. Now, consolidation reforms naturally require 3 things. 1, it requires a big focus on not just government spending, but the efficiency of spending. Okay. The second is that it requires investment intensity, which goes to this year's summit. So I don't want to bother you with this year's summit. And the third is it requires productivity. You must put people to work. Productivity-led disinflation. But to put people to work, investments must expand the opportunities to create jobs, to put people to work. And it's kind of a cascade. So it's consolidation, then acceleration. So stabilization, consolidation, acceleration. So we think that the next phase is consolidate to accelerate. I think I should stop there. Well, I think I've answered.
Thank you, CEO. Chair, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe a few thoughts from me. So specifically in terms of investment inflow in the last 12 months, some areas where I see the inflows in, if you look at oil and gas, there have been investment inflows by Total, by Shell, well over $5 billion. If you look into solid minerals, there have been inflows into that space, also into agri. And yeah, also if you look at telecoms, there's been well over $1 billion of inflow into telecoms just in the last 7 months of this year alone. But that's different from the over $50 billion of investment, announcement, and commitments. And what excites me is that some of these commitments are even coming from new partners. So in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, your UAE, different from our old partners in China or in Europe. So we're getting more interest, India, from different places. So that is some of the things that I've seen. I mean, the CEO has talked about how government is taking some of our recommendations and the ones that still need to be worked upon. I think our target is to expand the social distribution to like 25 million. I think government has done like 7.5 million or so. So they are working on it. It's not as if they are not doing it, but we would like it to be more, to reach more Nigerians. The second wave of reforms, I think it's around building institutions and also driving for results. So we've gotten the macro result. We now need to have the micro results. And building institutions to talk, for me, will be around sectoral reforms. So reforms that will drive growth in your blue economy, in solid minerals, in trade, etc. So we've got to have those growth-oriented reforms in certain sectors and in certain institutions. Border is closed for various reasons, trade, security, etc. But certainly we've always advocated for an open border. Open border, it's helpful, especially given the African Continental Free Trade Area that we've signed up to. We've got to open up to allow businesses, goods, services, and people to move across the country. This issue around FX rate coming to 1,000 naira, I really don't know the reason for 1,000. Why not 500? Why not 100? Or why not 12? I worry less about the number. I think what businesses focus on is the stability, the predictability. You know that it is this rate today, and it's likely to be around that same rate next month, next quarter. And like the DMARC has said, the rate has been stable around that 1,500 to 1,550 type. I rather focus on productivity. How do you drive productivity, both in private, business, public sector, and worry less about a particular rate. What drives your rate is not our wish, it's our production. It's what we produce and how well we produce it. So I think we've addressed all of the questions. So maybe we'll take a second round.
Okay, Toby. Please introduce yourself and your organization.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Jude from ProShare. So I think the question I wanted to ask is about production. So the chairman is already talking about it, but it looks like the government, maybe they have started now, but it looks like they are not into business. So they don't have business with business. So how can we ensure that you raise the bar for, like you said, from let's move away from consumption to production? How can we encourage SMEs? Because when you talk about production, it starts from the grassroots. So how can we encourage these people? And then most importantly, when it comes to food production, we have many factors that lead to inflation, like insecurity and all of that. And so in those places where we have food production, agriculture, these people have so many factors. And when they don't have enough food, they don't have enough production, it cannot get to other places like Lagos, for instance. How do we ensure these reforms get to the grassroots? Thank you.
Yes. Madam, please, let's take her. She's the only woman who's ventured to ask questions.
Gender equality. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. So my question is on, pardon me.
An organization.
My name is Chamunda Beng. I'm from New Central. And my question is on foreign direct investment. It's one thing for us to get the FDI coming into Nigeria, but what are we doing to work towards actually sustaining them? Around 2022, 2023, we had several sectors, especially within energy, declaring force majeures. And now we're having FDI again within those same sectors. And what steps are we taking towards casting our nets to include more people, more FDI in other sectors of Nigeria's economy?
Thank you. We'll take the gentleman in the white and then we'll wrap it up from there.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nuruddin from Pulse. I would like to talk about infrastructure because I think the chairman mentioned it as the second plank in the sub-theme of this year's theme. So we can see that the government is trying to make some moves in terms of building roads, railway, but there's this sentiment out there that some of these things are over-concentrated in a particular region of the country. So in the view of the group, do you think the government is doing the right thing in this direction? Considering, when you also factor the fact that inequitable distribution of infrastructure could also lead to alienation of economic inclusion in certain areas. So what would be the recommendation of the group to the president administration to make sure that there's a spread in terms of this infrastructure? And also, and more importantly, how can the government, because we know the government does not have enough resources to undertake some of these projects. So what can the government do to bring equity, especially in the power sector? We know there's been some kind of deregulation, partial deregulation in terms of banding. We have band A, band B, band C. So we still need more investment in this sector to boost power generation and distribution. So what will be the recommendation of the group to the administration on how to bring in money, on how to spread this opportunity? Thank you.
Thank you. CEO. Thank you.
Maybe I should begin with Nuruddin's question. So Nuruddin, Nigeria by budgeting to finance infrastructure will never have enough resources to meet our infrastructure ideals. When the Nigerian Infrastructure Master Plan was written 15 years ago, the total cost of building world-class infrastructure in Nigeria was put at about $3 trillion. At that time, at the current rate of budgeting at that time, it will have taken us 100 years to finance that infrastructure requirement. By that time, we're all gone. So the point is, you don't finance infrastructure with only budget fiscal allocation. Our consistent recommendation for the last decade is that Nigeria needs to pivot to an infrastructure financing architecture where our infrastructure stock, especially the bankable ones, are concessioned or delivered through public-private partnerships that are competitive. Just give it to your friend. You bring into the concession bid the most qualified technically, and the most capable financially to deliver it. Okay. The current infrastructure stock in Nigeria, according to, I think, the medium-term development plan 2021 to 2025, requires that we are financing the infrastructure at an investment cost of almost $20 billion a year. Again, your budget cannot carry that. So clearly, we must move to a model where we open up our infrastructure sector to investments. Now, investors invest in well-packaged great projects, the economic, financial viability, right? So now the better countries that are high FDI attractors. So I would say that that's why that needs to happen. And that's why at this summit, I think the chair technical and her team have created a whole pillar on investment. So come to the summit and hear the rest. Okay. My sister from News Central. Any FDI is a global phenomenon. FDI is not attracted to your country because you sing well, right? Or because you talk a good talk. The conditions for FDI are global, they're not Nigerian. When FDI is looking for a home, it just checks whether you're the right home. It's very sensitive to conditions, right? So the 6 factors for FDI form the basis for a session at the summit on attracting investments. So do we have the right investment climate? 2, do we have the right investment incentives? 3, do we have the right onboarding factors for investment? In other words, when I've committed to bring my money, is it harder or easier to bring it? Now, when I brought my money, do we have the easiest setup processes? In other words, I'm here already, I want to set up my business. Then when I'm running my concern, are we one of the easiest places to do business? Then lastly, are we one of the easiest places to reinvest? Now, all those criteria, Chair of Technical has created some unique plenaries and breakouts at Summit 31. If you want the answer, see you at Next 31. Okay. Then pressure on productivity. NESG's philosophy of productivity is very clear. We believe in what we call GDP with depth. In other words, it's not just the size of the GDP. The GDP must have diversification. The GDP must have non-oil export-led earnings. The GDP must have productivity in terms of services productivity, manufacturing productivity, and agricultural productivity. The GDP must have technology intensity in terms of upgrade and the input of both digital and technology innovation. And the GDP must have human capital development. That's the GDP we are looking for. So, Prosper, we are very clear. Now, how to make that work requires that you align the national plans. And so ask DMAC the question, you align the national plans to the indicators for making a country very productive and then driving that together. And so at the summit, again, there is a session that focuses on socioeconomic inclusion that uses the GDP with depth as a framework. So again, Prosper, see you at the summit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. DMAC, you.
Thank you. I think most of the issues have been addressed by the CEO. Then the first question on encouraging SMEs. At the minister's address, you saw when he mentioned the issue of world-based development program. So that program is designed to support the 8,800 and how do you do it? What we have done is to conduct a survey on the dominant economic activities in all the wards in the country. And how do you do it? If you come to my village in my ward, and what is dominant is there is agric, maybe crop farming, they will create clusters of farmers, maybe 10 people per cluster, and then support them by providing maybe tillers and the farm inputs to support what they're doing. If they are more of poultry farmers, then you provide chicks and feeds for them. So that if they are doing more of maybe welding, so you support them with funds to get their inputs for welding. And that's what the government is doing at the moment. And that's about 2 weeks ago, this was approved by the Federal Executive Council for Nigeria to move to support SMEs. And we know that SMEs are the engines of growth of the economy. If they are supported properly, the economy will grow properly. So the issue of power deregulation, power infrastructure regulation, I think government is already taking steps to do this. I'm not sure there is anything that is just to improve on what is being done to ensure that we have stable power, just like we have in the telecoms. And that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Oko and Dr. Ajiloji. Just a few thoughts from me. I think the new tax reforms, once they go into implementation next year, will significantly impact SMEs. You know, the tax reforms has increased will reduce and consolidate many taxes, multiple taxations, multiple whatever into just those 4 tax acts now. So that will reduce the complexity, that will reduce the burden for SMEs. But more importantly, I think it also has provisions that for SMEs that produce with revenues below 50 million, they really don't have to pay CIT, company contacts and co. So that will help SMEs. So and the NESG will continue to support the committee as they go into implementation. Minister Jumoke Oduwole has said it clear FDI into the country and how to grow and diversify the FDIs into various sectors. And so she's taking that charge, and we'll also continue to support her to ensure that we continue to sustain FDI and grow FDIs. And the tax reforms will also institutions will also help, and that's why strengthening institutions is the 4th sub-teams at the at NEST 31. It's really about strengthening our institutions, so the institutions can provide the clarity, the predictability that investors require. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think it's about time to bring this to a good closure. We would, however, have the JPC private sector co-chair give the vote of thanks. She's joining virtually. We would just take a vote of thanks. Oh, the CEO has something before the...
Yes, it's just to say we have compiled, for the sake of the media, the impact assessment report. It's available online, but we have asked that it be dropped in your media room link. It has the detailed impact assessment of the economic summits from Summit 1 to Summit 30. So you can trace the reform recommendations, how many years it took to implement it, what it delivered, what is left undone. Because this is something that, you know, our colleagues constantly ask for. So we made it available in the media room as part of your media pack. So please, we want to encourage you to refer to it, because just the way you ask us, what did the citizens ask it a lot. And when it comes from you, sometimes it's better than when it comes from us. So I want to encourage you to check that out. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, before, so that I don't lose that, let me just write on what the CEO said. You could just take a minute to scan the QR code on the screen, and you'd have the link to download the assessment reports. So let's have Dr. Aisha Umar.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished permanent secretary and my co-chair, the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, members of the Joint Planning Committee for the NEST 31, captains of industry and leaders of the private sector, esteemed members of the media, distinguished ladies, gentlemen, and all protocols duly observed. It is my profound honor and privilege to deliver this vote of thanks at the close of today's proceedings. First and foremost, I extend deep appreciation to the federal government of Nigeria, particularly the Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning, for its unwavering collaboration with the Nigerian Economic Summit Group in hosting this year's summit. Your leadership and commitment to sustaining reforms gives life to the conversations we've had today. To our distinguished speakers, your insights have not only enriched today's discussion, but have also challenged us to think more deeply and act more boldly. You have brought clarity to complex issues and have inspired a renewed sense of urgency in the pursuit of inclusive, sustainable growth. To the captains of industry, private sector leaders, and development partners who have joined us, we thank you for your steadfast partnership. Your continued support reflects a shared belief that Nigeria's prosperity is both possible and within reach when we work together. I must also commend the tireless effort of the Joint Planning Committee and the Nigerian Economic Summit Group Secretariat, who've worked behind the scenes to make today a success. Your dedication, often unseen, ensures that this summit remains the premier platform for shaping Nigeria's economic future. To the media, thank you for amplifying our voices and ensuring that these important conversations reach every Nigerian. The story of Nigeria's reforms and future is incomplete without your contributions. And finally, to all those participants, both here in this hall, and those who've joined us virtually, I say thank you. Your engagement, questions, and contributions affirm the spirit of collective ownership that lies in the heart of the Nigerian Economic Summits. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we leave here today, let us not see this summit as an end, but as a beginning. The real work lies in translating our dialogue into decisive action so that the vision of sustaining reforms for prosperity and inclusive development becomes the lived reality of every Nigerian. On behalf of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, I thank you all most sincerely. May the journey we have begun today move Nigeria closer to the promise of a prosperous, inclusive, and globally competitive nation. Thank you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you. So in conclusion, please, media partners, there's a media room which you're quite familiar with. All the information required on NES31 is uploaded there. We have FAQs. We have also a link that will be shared with you on the impact assessments report and pretty much any questions that you may have concerning the NES31 coming up in October. And we also look forward to you supporting the amplification of the messaging for the summits before and even whilst during the summit is going on. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Moji Saka, and I'm the co-chair, private sector, media and publicity for NES31. Do have a great afternoon. God bless you all. We'll take photographs. We'll take here and then we'll go outside to take. So we'll have the four of them take the photographs. Okay. Hey. I guess it's because of the table. So that way, take advantage of. We'll share Thanks so much for your time. Wait around for We'll share with you. How are you, sir? I need to get the contact.
There's not like this. There's not. What if there was a there's no